On today's episode, we take a look at some blustering about America's military might, analyze a libertarian gatekeeping libertarianism against people who care about COVID restrictions, listen to the infinite wisdom of a 9-year-old on masks, learn how nothing that required education existed before public schools, and lastly, we hear a creative solution to rescuing Ukrainian refugees. This is Cringe Posts. Hello friends, welcome to this episode of the Cringe Posts podcast. This is the show where we gather the cringiest political and cultural takes in your feed. We break down where they went wrong and try to give our own input on them. I am Donald and I'm here with my co-host Britt. And before we get started, we always like to look at our own cringe. We like to make sure that we are making fun of ourselves, showing that, you know what, people can change. And just because you had a cringy post in the past or right now, doesn't mean you're not going to become better and grow from it, hopefully. If you are enjoying the content, we always appreciate a like, a subscription, a comment, all that good stuff really helps us grow. We appreciate it. And as a reminder, if you are listening to this and you ever want to catch up or follow along with these posts and you're not watching our YouTube or Odyssey channels, you can do so at cringeposts.com, where we post the slides of all the different cringy posts, so you can see those visually. If you just want to dwell on them and take them in and read the words rather than just hear us say them. Make sure that we're not just making this up, because we don't fake posts, and if we do, we tell you. So there you go. But let's move on, and we're going to go ahead and roast my co-host Britt here. This post comes from 2010. Britt writes, "Pain, both physical and emotional, is such an odd thing." And boy, I wonder, I mean,
is there another type of pain? I don't know.
I think there's existential pain, and that's what this post puts me through. It's such a ouch. It's such a nothing statement. You know what I mean? What are you trying? What kind of interaction are you trying to get online with that? What kind of discussion are you going to have?
I'm trying to get someone to ask me, "Why are you sad?" That's what I'm trying to get. I it's like looking back at my psychotic self. It's like, I know what you were doing, dude. You were trying to get someone to ask why you were in pain, and obviously it wasn't that bad because I don't even remember what it was about. So
the funny thing is, at least in my experience, maybe you're similar. I think we're geared a little bit similarly dispositionally, but maybe you feel this way too. Sometimes I would make these posts and you'd want people to know that there was something wrong, but you didn't necessarily always want people to be digging in and asking and confronting you with it. You almost just wanted to signal there's something going on and then have people like, "Oh man," and then maybe one or two. But just the idea of it almost, because if someone were to ask me, I probably would have said, no, I'm fine. And then obviously signal that I'm not fine, but also not try to talk and resolve whatever I'm going through.
Yeah, it's like, dude, you're being a drama queen. Like, chill out. There's other right before when I was trying to find something to put on here, it's just scrolling through all these things. Like, it's just all desperate cries for attention, but like the type of like, give me attention, but not too much, like to where I actually have to explain myself, where you might realize that I'm not worthy of your attention, right? So don't pay too much attention, just enough that you keep doing it in the future. And hopefully I've moved on from that. But you know what they say about podcasters, right? We're just trying to get attention. So maybe it's just evolved. I don't know.
True. Pain, both physical, emotional, existential, and through podcasts is such an odd thing. So let's explore more of that pain and some other people's painful posts. And this one isn't so much a post as it is a quote, and it comes. The post comes from The Hill, and it is quoting Representative Madison Cawthorn, who said, "When the United States military shows up, kings and kingdoms fall to their knees. As the great philosopher Toby Keith once said, we put a boot in their ass. It's the American way. Our military preeminence is unmatched. Our brand is dominance."
Oh my god!
Was that the case in Vietnam? I'm just asking for a friend. I think our military preeminence. Yeah, I was gonna say Afghanistan, Iraq. There's a lot of great examples of our military preeminence being unmatched, but maybe not in a great way. Maybe not in the way he means. Speaking of these ridiculous sayings that are attention grabbing or trying to sound deep, What a nothing speech that is this puffing up your chest for no reason. I'm curious. I want to know the full context. It's actually kind of hard to find until a few days when they have the videos of the floor speeches up, for records. I want to know what context this is being said in, because it's just so painful to see. If you're talking about what I imagine is the Ukraine situation, are you trying to escalate things with Russia? Are you trying to go in and say, we're going to take on Russia and we're going to be the big man here? Kings and kingdoms fall to their knees in front of us. Because that's a great way to get us into nuclear war, where you, the politicians saying all these things, and the bureaucrats who orchestrate these things don't suffer. They don't go to the front lines. It's just the other people. And he may be a vet. I think he is. But the point is that if you're not the one volunteering to go, and I know he's in a wheelchair now, so he really couldn't. I just think it's puffing up for a World War III type scenario just seems kind of in poor taste.
Yeah, that is in poor taste. The warmongering, ooh, look at me, big, strong. It's one thing if you say that and you are that, but it's like, man, name a war that we've convincingly won, right? In the past, 70 years, without our, any objectives being significantly compromised, and or having a situation where it blows up in our face. It's just, okay, kings and kingdoms fall to their knees. It's like, dude, we couldn't even get the goat herders in Afghanistan to, roll over. We left with our tail between our legs. It's really, what is the term? It's like, hey, if you drive a big truck, you're probably compensating for something. It's like, if you do this, it's like America has to, because we've kind of had all these situations blow up in our face. It's like, we got to psych ourselves up, and it's like, we're psyching ourselves up to get our tails between our legs again. It's just, I don't know. I don't get why politicians feel they need to. Well, I do actually, because they want to be perceived as the strong man, right? Strong man usually gets votes and stuff. But I don't know. I've been kind of encouraged as of late that people aren't really taking that. I mean, obviously the classic NPCs and stuff are, but a lot of Republicans, if you told me 20 years ago, hey, Republicans will be against war, or a lot of the Daily Wire guys will be like, hey, we shouldn't be in Ukraine, I'd be like, oh, that seems kind of infeasible. That wouldn't happen. But they're saying that today, which is pretty cool to me. So there's some hope, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe, again, this quote could be taken out of context. I wouldn't put it past the Hill to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe he's saying this and going, and in spite of that, we shouldn't get involved in Ukraine because there's no definite goal to win or something like that. He could be saying that. But even if that's the case, and that's sort of the best case scenario for this would be my contention, I still think it's just such a cringy thing to say, because you want to puff up this ideal America, and we have the firepower for sure, but strategically speaking, we're going into places, we're killing civilians, we're bombing hospitals, we're destroying villages and killing children. And for what? Are these the military victories that you're bragging about here? Kings and kingdoms fall to their knees because they were not really putting up a fight against us, You look at Iraq, and that was a complete, red herring of an invasion compared to any actual threats. They were trying to do the same thing to Iran, and were spread so thin military-wise across the globe that when you don't dedicate to a singular strategic mission with an end goal, you have a strategic goal to achieve and an exit plan. When you don't have that, or your goal and plan is to stay forever, you end up not being able to have this dominant presence that he seems to think we still have. You might have been able to make this claim in World War II, right? In the aftermath of that, sort of saying, the U.S. went in and cleaned up the war and we sent it home, whether or not the historical details add up to that. You could at least make that claim, but I think in the last 2 decades, it's much, much harder to make this claim.
Yeah, we may need to retract a little bit of this. So I found the full quote here.
Okay.
So, and they conveniently cut it off, man.
Yeah.
The Hill, the Hill cut it off. Our brand is dominance. So he says all the stuff that he says. He says our brand is dominance, but our greatness lies in temperance. Congress declares war, not Joe Biden, not some woke general Congress. The people must decide and debate if it's absolutely necessary for us to go to war.
Cool.
The sons and daughters are too precious to waste on the altar of globalism. So Pretty good job, actually, Mr. Cawthorn. Bad on you, the Hill, for taking him out of context.
I still think this.
The point still stands.
Right. Yeah. I still think, like I was saying, the initial thing is, where have you been the last 20 years? That's not the U.S.'s MO. And I'm glad to say, that he isn't doing this to drum up the war drum. So good for him on that. But still, and maybe this is just more of a symptom of the base he has to appeal to, and maybe he's being a savvy politician, right? Trying to be like, we need to.
He's North Carolina, so
yeah. So that's probably what he's playing to. But this is the popular sentiment among some of those people, whether they're Trumpian or not. And I think that's maybe the thing to bring to the picture that's a little bit less optimistic than the white pill of Republicans are sort of going anti-war, or at least more hesitant to go to war, is that there's still this need to feel puffed up and mighty and fierce. At best, you can say, in order to deter intervention, but at worst, it's this dissonant ideology that you still want to be the tough man, you still want to be the arbiters of justice around the world, but we just need to make sure that we're putting our priorities first, which I tend to think is generally the disposition of a lot of them, unfortunately. But hey, good for Madison Cawthorn, I guess.
He was almost there. He's almost there. Just remove the first half of it, man.
Yeah. But of course, we'll leave it to the Hill to cut things out of context. So, okay. The next post we will move on to. This is from a self-described libertarian, and maybe someone who's not in the wing of libertarianism that Brett or I would consider ourselves, which would be the libertarian wing of libertarianism, for the record. But this person tweets, if you became a libertarian because of COVID restrictions and not because of police brutality, I'ma be skeptical. Your priorities are in the wrong place. I think this is such a gatekeeping, snobby, terrible thing to say. So, you and I agree police brutality is a bad issue. I also would say that the way that police brutality has often been portrayed through media sources and popular culture leaves people who want to question narratives and not buy everything you're being spoon-fed. It gives them hesitation and pause. Because, for instance, there will be statistics cited about how only African-American people are profiled by police brutality, and they're only the ones of the victims of this. And that's just simply not the case. White people, on average, have much higher rates of this. Now, are there things that are racist? In our episode with Eric Brakey, he broke down a bunch of them. The crack cocaine versus powder cocaine laws, or the drug war as a whole. All kinds of things have been policies that have been informed by racism that disproportionately affect black people. But when the media is trying to take more ground than there is and say things like, or at least convey the ideas that only black people are the victims of police brutality, that leads a lot of people who are reasonable, can look up the numbers, or just don't buy everything they're being told and can see with their own eyes. It gives them pause and hesitation. So maybe you didn't become a libertarian because of police brutality, because it was a left-wing talking point that wasn't conveyed very well, and probably something that you yourself are not experiencing firsthand. So there's not that level of empathy just from the lack of experience. And then when COVID comes in, you now realize, holy cow, this is something that can happen to everyone. The state is enforcing this, and I'm directly being impacted. So now you're going to be a libertarian because you've been affected. Now, sure, I wish everyone was a perfect angel that could perfectly know what good and just things in the universe are so, and to know every scenario that is unjust, and to stand up for those things from the moment they're born. But that's not how humans are. And so to be able to take an experience that happens to you and then grow from that and extrapolate that further, it means that people being brought in because of COVID probably will have more sympathy for people affected by police brutality now. So to say that you're skeptical, your priorities are on the wrong place, It's such a backwards attitude, and it's a reason why this wing of the Libertarian Party is losing, not gaining recruits.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I guess you kind of did it to steel man this guy's argument or gal's argument. Like, it's like, okay, people that are coming to the Libertarian Party because of COVID restrictions are only doing it because it now affects them, right? Like, I could see that being like an argument you could make. I don't think it's very strong, but I think it's the strongest one you can make based off this guy's post. It's like, well, if someone comes in because it directly affects them, then the second it doesn't affect them or it goes away, then they're not going to be a libertarian anymore. Or just it kind of signals their motivations. But to your point, COVID restrictions and the police that were so venerated by the conservatives now cracking down on the conservative businesses that tried to stay open, and conservatives realizing, oh my gosh, like, it doesn't matter if we've supported them. Like, if the government gives them an order to unconstitutionally, enforce their will upon us, like, they're going to do it. And I think it's a wonderful thing for people to wake up and realize that it's not the fact that, there are good police or bad police. It's the fact that the police have a monopoly on violence and the ability to do whatever they want with impunity without any immediate consequence, right? That is the issue. And if they wake up to that, they're going to be against police brutality no matter how it goes, right? Because now they recognize and they're more empathetic of like, okay, because they did this to me here, like, yeah, like there's a chance that, when, Philando Castile or whoever got shot, maybe I should be a little bit more skeptical, right? Instead of just starting to toe the blue line. This just reminds me of someone that's like, you're both coworkers at a place and like, this guy's kind of like a snob because you didn't go to an Ivy League school, right? But it's like, well, we both ended up at the same place, man. So yeah, it's just, you just like having your preeminent spot in here, and you're kind of threatened by the fact that really competent people are now entering the movement. That's kind of how these guys all hit me, at least.
Yeah, I think so. I think they view it as this insiders club, and unless they're bringing in the hand-chosen people who they feel mirror their own personalities and their own priorities, as he says, then you're not welcome in the club if you're not one of those people. And we want to make sure that only hand-picked people are coming in, people who think exactly like me. For some, for a party of individualists, these people want uniformity in how people think. And that's the crazy thing. To me, I'm in my personal values, I'm a conservative Christian. I wouldn't call myself a political conservative, but my moral views align that way. But I don't really care if someone has the entire opposite viewpoint from me. If they're a libertarian and their pet issue is the drug war, whatever. But as long as they're not advocating for things, well, not to say I'm against drug war policies being alleviated. I just mean that's not my number one issue. But if that's theirs, that's fine. As long as you're not trying to impose COVID restrictions on me, as long as you're not trying to get us involved in foreign wars, as long as your priorities are removing the state in our lives and the grasp of their hand in every facet of what we do, then we're on the same team, and I'm happy to have you helping. In fact, specialization in different areas is probably a good thing. The last thing I would say is, to your point about the police not only shutting down businesses, I think even more, the Kyle Rittenhouse case is a great example of people who may have been moderate, not even conservative, people who maybe were thinking, I don't really need a gun, or I don't really need self-defense because the police will always show up and I can always call the police. And that, I mean, there was a lot of media hype and sensationalism, so I'm sure a lot of people are under the wrong impression, but I'm sure there's a good amount of people who were somewhat neutral, apathetic, or moderate on gun ownership that firsthand saw a child running towards cops and them doing absolutely nothing to protect him when he was being chased with weapons. So if that's someone's motivation versus police brutality, that's still good. Police apathy versus police brutality is also a good thing, But unless you come in through their little narrow path, I guess you're not good enough for them. Okay. Unless you've got anything else, we'll move to the next.
I don't have any more on that one.
Okay. The one thing I will say about the previous one is, further down, I saw another libertarian prominent person saying, I disagree. I think we need to make the tent as wide as possible, kind of a thing. And someone else was saying something about, like how young or how early do you need to care about this thing? Because at some point, people are gonna not be aware that that's an issue. And the original poster replied saying something along the lines of, "I had written about this in my journal since 6th effing grade. It's not that hard." And then of course my favorite, someone's like, "Wow, not 4th grade? Not sure you're pure enough, dude." it's funny, right? The gatekeeping is an ever-moving goalpost, and I think it's stupid. So, okay, our next post comes from I believe this is pronounced Ellie Mistel, who writes, "Here's my 9-year-old's analysis. I agreed with almost everything President Biden said, except for the part about not wearing masks in places like schools. I think maybe President Biden doesn't understand how easy it is to wear a mask." Oh my gosh. And then we have some replies to this post. The first one reading, "Smart kid. At this point, masks can be thought of as common courtesy. People who don't wear masks, what do you think this tells people about you?" Second reply, "My kids agree. Plus masks equal safety has been drilled into their heads for over a year, and they're a little freaked out to have the school now say, 'Never mind. Our county went mask optional this week. My kids decided to keep wearing theirs.'" And the last reply we'll look at here says, "I agree with your 9-year-old. I understand that President Biden is trying to dull the sting of the furor against masks mandates, but I continue to wear a mask and feel safer around people who do." There is so much content here. Britt, we could have literally just spent the whole episode dissecting this one. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's start, I guess, from the top here. Stop bringing in your children into the political posts. One, if your 9-year-old said
is your 9-year-old a scientist?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not taking medical advice from Joe Rogan, but my 9-year-old says something that is parroting a talking point he heard. Oh boy, yay! Your 9-year-old didn't say this, and if they did, that's terrifying. They probably did, though, because it's a blue check mark. So, to be perfectly honest, their 9-year-old probably did say that. I always find it really funny when people use kids, and maybe I've said this on a post before. I think I have, but it's a point I've made before. But when people use kids to demonstrate their political value, to say something like, "It's so simple, my 9-year-old could get it." I don't know. That's not very compelling to me, because it's like 9-year-olds think a lot of stupid things. You're also saying your ideology is dumbed down enough to a level that a 9-year-old agrees with it and doesn't understand complexity, or your 9-year-old is just repeating talking points. No offense to the 9-year-old, but I wouldn't take any advice from a 9-year-old, to be perfectly honest. They can say things I agree with, but the fact that they're 9 years old makes me think they're saying this and I agree with them in spite of them being 9, not the other way around. So I always laugh when people posit it as though this is some... See, it's so obvious my 9-year-old agrees. Kind of makes me think of those Geico commercials. So simple a caveman could do it. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that first post before we go to the others, or do you want to jump in on?
Yeah, we can move. I'll take the first comment on there. So you know, smart kid. They say, and it's just crazy to me, man. Like, so one, people have been saying for 2 years now that the cloth masks don't work. There is some evidence that if you wear an N95 properly, you never take it off, you seal it around your face to the point where you have marks on it, that will protect you in some form or fashion from COVID, potentially, especially if other people are doing it. The reason it doesn't work, though, is because no one can wear that. You can't expect a whole society to wear those masks properly throughout their entire day and be able to function all together. It's just not going to happen. And that's why you see, when you compare different counties or states all together, the counties that have strict mask mandates versus the ones that don't basically have the same curve, right, in terms of infection rate and disease and all that. So it's always funny to me, like, these people are now saying, like, oh, well, like, despite the science, right, which people have been saying for 2 years, but now has been made acceptable because the CDC now acknowledges it, Despite the CDC saying it, it's like, well, it's just a common courtesy. We feel safer. It's like, well, what do you mean you feel safer, right? Like, what do you mean by that? Are you actually safer, or do you just feel safer? Because if you just feel safer and you're not actually safer, what right do you have to do to like force other people to do it? And how can you say that it's a common courtesy to wear it if it doesn't actually make us safer, right? And that's the last part on the first person's post that gets me is, what do you think this tells people about you? That I am a thinking individual, right? That's what I think it tells people about me. To you, it's a signal of whether they're Republican or Democrat, right? In their mind. In reality, what it means is you're either with the establishment and you hold the right opinions, or you don't, and you're against the establishment and the propaganda. And that's what these folks. This is what happened with this, right? They segmented the world and the United States into people that have acceptable opinions and people that don't, and the masks are a good way to tell that, because it's like we said in the past, the emperor's new clothes. It's like everyone's saying that, oh, the clothes look so great, even though he's in his pajamas, and the one person that says, what, he's in pajamas, like he's not wearing new clothes, is ostracized, right? Because no one wants to look stupid, and that's what this is all turned into. It's just it's unfortunate, man. It's like this is such a clear like cognitive dissonance, right? Like how can you both say that like, oh, it's a common courtesy to keep people safe, but now, even though all the science says that it doesn't, the acceptable science that you listen to justify all of us wearing masks is now saying the opposite, and you still won't believe it. So this has really done kind of just done a work on some people's brains, man. And I think a lot of these people will be wearing masks maybe for the rest of their lives, which would be really sad.
The last line of that post, yeah, what do you think, or what do you think this tells people about you? I think of that quote. I don't even know what it's from, but someone says something like, I don't know, maybe I'm completely messing this up. Something like, I think you're rotten, or something like that. I think you're a terrible person, or something. And then the person replies, I don't think much about you at all, or something like that. And that's kind of my thought with this. What do you think this signals about what other people think about you? I'm like, I don't care, really. I'm not living my life.
The truth.
Yeah, I'm not living my life to be perceived by other people as a great person. I'm trying to live my life doing the right thing. I'm trying to live in a world that acknowledges truth, and trying to do things that are going to support that truth. I don't think it's a good thing to put on a mask that does absolutely nothing except coddle people's minds and shield them from a reality, make them more compliant, make them question less the false narratives that are being told. I think about the common image of the one man in the crowd of Nazis who didn't salute, and everyone's like, be that person. And the first opportunity we get, where it's not even that hard, we're not even going to get shot. Most places, you're not even going to get thrown out of the grocery store for not wearing the mask, and people won't do it. I saw a tweet that said something along the lines of, we now know the kinds of people who would throw the Japanese in internment camps, talking about the way that people are treating Russians and Russian media and stuff. But I think this is also very equally applicable in this situation. Maybe I'll get the Jew hater stamp for this, but I think it's the exact same scenario. But anyway, a little bit of a tangent there. Let's get to the next.
Do you remember the before we move on from this one? Do you remember the post we did? I think it was in our first 10 episodes, and it was right when the vaccine came out, and this guy on Facebook posted, "Hey, like, so what are we doing for people that are vaccinated? Because it stops the spread. Like, do we need to wear a pin or something? Because I don't want to wear a mask, but I also don't want to be thought of as a Republican."
Yeah,
and it's like, oh, okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, exactly.
They're so terrified of being seen as a Republican, and obviously not wearing a mask means you're a Republican. It's like, dude,
yeah, and that's this first reply here. It's it's common courtesy. What do you think other people care about you? Not it's common courtesy to keep them safe. It's common courtesy because what do you think they're going to think about you? This hand wringing about how you're perceived by other people it's stupid. It's understandable. Don't get me wrong. I get it. There's so much peer pressure for it. But to say those words rather than instinctively react that way are two different things. I think feeling peer pressured into doing that, into wearing your mask in a scenario where it's not helping because you don't want to be the odd one out. I understand why so many people do that. But then actively promote it, I think, is an entirely different ballpark where that's ridiculous. Okay, the second reply to this tweet here, oh my gosh. So to remind you, my kids agree plus masks equals safety has been drilled into their heads for over a year. And now they're freaked out to have the school say, never mind. This person should type that out and then read what they typed and think, oh, wait, holy cow, this is not good. Because if this person legitimately believes, if this person's had trust the science, trust the CDC, trust the science, trust the CDC drilled into their heads for 2 years, then they should realize that the CDC saying it's okay now means that their kids should think it's okay now and they shouldn't be freaked out. Or this person should realize that there shouldn't be this power to drill into their head this idea that then freaks them out. Either this person should be in the same scenario as their kid, which would mean at the end of it that they have to believe what the CDC says. So they should be horrified that their kid doesn't trust the science and trust the CDC. Or this person shouldn't like the idea that ideas get drilled into their own head, and they should hate that same pattern for their child. So this is terrifying to me that this person acknowledges that this has freaked out their kids, and they're not feeling bad as a parent. They're not feeling like this is wrong and I need to make sure my kids feel okay, and they shouldn't be put in a spirit of fear by this.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we have indoctrinated our kid with a lie, right, for the past few years, and this person's solution is not, oh my gosh, we need to undo this. Their thing is, no, we need to continue with it, right? They're going to continue wearing masks at their, you've made an unhealthy kid. They now have a complex in their brain that unless, 60 to 70% of their face is covered with a cloth that does absolutely nothing, they're not safe. It's like, you've got a really big problem, bigger problem than whether your school district has stopped using masks or not when a kid feels that way. It reminds me of all the videos that kind of came out when schools started dropping the mask mandates of kids just like cheering. Yeah. And it just made me sick to my stomach, man. Not because I'm sad that the mask mandate's going away. It's just that it's like, holy cow, like what have we done, to as a society to our children to where, it's like, oh, their chains have been let off, and they're cheering. It was really, really terrifying to me.
Yeah.
This next one is to remind everyone. This person agrees with Ellie Mistel's 9-year-old, and they also understand that President Biden is trying to dull the sting of the furor against mask mandates. It's like, why is there a furor against masks and mandates? Maybe you should ask yourself that question. Oh, because they don't work, right? And you destroyed a country's economy and hundreds of thousands of people's livelihoods.
No, Brett, it's because people are racists. Because they're Trump, racist. MAGA supporter,
white supremacists.
Alt-right white supremacists.
Oh my gosh. And it's just like, it's so weird, man. It's there's going to be, I hope that we're around for this, and I hope that they're still thinking people that can study, the psychology of this time period, because it's going to be really interesting. Because it's so well documented, right? Like you literally have this psychosis playing out on Twitter for everyone to see. Like we got 4 of them right here, where a 9-year-old's advice is good. The people that have been right for the past 2 years' advice is not good and not as valued, and living a lie despite the truth being out there. It's wild.
It's funny because this also demonstrates how people justify believing the stuff that Greta Thunberg touts, Yeah. You're like, it's a kind of a cringe conservative thing to say, oh, we're just trusting a kid now, and then take it no further when you're actually critiquing her commentary. Like, take down the ideas, of course, but they're not wrong that they're using this.
She's not really a kid anymore. She's 18,
well,
but yeah.
Yeah, she's not now. I mean, when she started, the how dare you speech and whatnot.
How dare you?
I mean, it was disgusting what they did to her in so many ways. But at the same point, it's also disgusting that people are buying the stuff that she's spewing too. As though, again, you indoctrinate a child or an impressionable youth, and then they regurgitate the mainstream talking points, and now you're like, wow, that's powerful that this kid says it. It's like it's an appeal to authority, but the authority isn't even worth appealing to. It's so weird. So
That's a great point, man. That's a really good point.
Yeah, I think that's
I'll have to
how
use
it is
that
with
one.
all these kids. Yeah, why it
Yeah.
feels like that way with all these. My 3-year-old said, my 5-year-old said, my not. Who cares? They're not an authority. Not that makes it better if they were an authority, but I just mean even
so it's kind of probably stems out of like I'm trying to think of a good example, and I'm kind of losing it right now of one, but like there is something refreshing about a kid when they say something honest and true that adults don't have the courage to say, right? And that's kind of what they're trying to get at. But this isn't about that. It's a 9-year-old commenting on a technical detail that they have they haven't done, even their first science class probably, in any meaningful way, at least at that age. And it's like, I think it is to bring it back to the Emperor's New Clothes. I think it is a child, right? That points out like he's wearing pajamas, and like that is where a child is, but it's not because it's a child saying it. It's because a child is innocent enough to say what is honest and real in that moment. And ironically, this is just incredibly dishonest, right? Both in what the story they're trying to say, and in the point.
And I think, I think that's it, right? Because parents often get surprised by wisdom from, out of the mouth of babes comes wisdom, as the saying is. And sometimes kids will stumble onto profound statements and profound realities that are not obvious and apparent. Something that you don't look at, a bridge in the woods and it's, a kid says, you can use that bridge to cross the river. And that's not a profound statement. You're just kind of seeing the thing in front of you and remarking on it. Or, you as a kid or you as a parent are on a hike with your kid and you say, we're up way high. And then the kid says something along the lines of, I am much higher than I was before. That's not a profound statement, really, right? But when they're able to say something based on the truths and the realities they've observed and the pieces they put together, and they can say something that is different, that's new, that's unique, something along the lines of, if we're going back to the bridge, something like, this bridge must have been built by people thousands of years ago, and it's still here and outlasted them. Something like that. You'd be like, wow, that's a remarkable thing to say, because there's all kinds of stuff around here that's not spelled out for them. They had to piece this together. They had to say something at least profound for them. But every example that we see on the internet of people touting their 9-year-old, like, we'll fight back against Trump, or I'm going to wear a mask anyway. These aren't profound things. These are just the narratives that everyone in popular culture, the popular narrative, is saying. And it's just what's being brainwashed into their heads over and over. As the second reply here says, the masks equal safety has been drilled into their heads for over a year. So no one here should be surprised when a 9-year-old says that, because that's the only thing he's been saying, being told, I should say.
Great point.
Our next post. Okay, here we go. So this one is talking about the idea that Corey DeAngelis brings up, letting the funding follow the student, and talking about allowing people to not have to pay for taxes and things like that, I believe, into the public school system. So we've got a couple. It's a whole discussion thread, and we'll start it here. It reads, so people who don't have kids should be able to get their money back, and people who don't use public parks should get that money back. And if I don't use public transit, I should get that money back. And I'd like to prorate my money that goes to freeways I rarely use, ... We're going to file that one under accidentally based, because this was said as though it was a big checkmate. And
Keep
that
going.
gets a reply. Like, yes. So this gets this reply that says, yes, people who don't have kids should get their money back. I'm a libertarian. The idea is to stop the theft, not continue it. It's the people's money, so they should choose where it goes, not some politician. And then there's a reply from someone else who says, I'm okay with this. People that opt out of paying into the education system should just have to wait in line behind those that fund education for everything that requires education. From going to the gas station to the doctor, if you don't pay in, you don't get access. Okay. Again, accidentally based. Because the great thing about this is in a society where schooling and those kinds of systems are entirely voluntary, there very likely would actually be probably some subsect of businesses that form some maybe alliance or something like that. And it's like, if you buy our membership to help us fund, you get priority treatment here. And then there's a competing one that takes care of a different school education system or a different road system or things like that. And the idea is you would only have to pay in proportion to what you use and what you need. And then, of course, the market would answer for people who aren't paying that. And there would be options for people who aren't paying into those other systems. But the great thing about it is that you wouldn't be paying for things you don't use. And so if you are using something and it's not good service, you would pay to choose to support some other system. You'd pay to support some other association or something like that. People are innovative. People like to form associations. They like to do things that will benefit themselves. And in a capitalist system and voluntary exchange, that means benefiting other people. So all of those things that this person's like, go get in the back line if you don't pay taxes for, it's like, well, no, let's just do it so that people who want to run businesses can set it up that way. Like, help fund this education grant. And guess what? You get a free perk at this grocery store because we want to appeal to customers that by saying we support schools, we support education. There's all kinds of ways that this system actually could work if you don't say it as in this defeatist attitude, like it's a bad one.
Yeah, The thing that kind of got to me was like, well, if you don't, unless you fund the education system, which is responsible for all progress we've ever made from gas stations to doctors, you don't get to be a part of it. It's like, you know what? I was homeschooled. I had a bunch of friends who were homeschooled. Some of those friends that were homeschooled and didn't use $1 of the public school system are now doctors, right?
Yep.
They're exiting their residency, and you know the education that made that possible for them to be a doctor, they paid for, right? And the way that I pay and not subsidized, but basically the way that cost is recaptured is by the fact that I pay them as a doctor to see me, right?
Yep.
And so it's like it's all these different like. It's like, no, we do pay, right? I'm not opting out of paying for these services. When I pay for these services, I'm paying for all the infrastructure that went in place to get them to happen, right? Like the reason a doctor is so expensive, the reason a doctor makes, at the beginning on average $180,000 a year is because they paid for all the schooling in the past. They have to recoup that loss. So they pass it on to you, the consumer, right? And so that's just, it's like, it's this weird collectivist thing. It's the Obama, you didn't build that, line where it's like, well, everything we've got, we owe to our, great education system. It's like, no, what's happened is the market has succeeded in spite of the crappy public education system. In spite of that, entrepreneurs and professionals are innovating and generating value, despite all of the different costs and property taxes and things. It's the exact opposite of what this person thinks.
Right. And of course the other fun aspect of that too is like they're going to deny, I mean, at the end they say you have to wait in line, but then at the end they sort of end it say, if you don't pay in, you don't get access. It's like, who is this person to determine that? What if the doctor wants to see the patients? I mean, the Hippocratic Oath doesn't make this kind of distinction of I'm only going to see a patient that pays me or that supports the education system that I support. The Hippocratic Oath is one that I'm going to take care of people the best I can and I'll do no harm. That kind of spirit permeates I would say the majority of people, not these loud, obnoxious people who can't fathom the idea that you get to keep your own money and spend it in ways that is going to help you and the people around you. And so I think about this and I'm like, no, most people, if we had some kind of system like this where you don't have to pay into the systems you don't use, they wouldn't discriminate on that basis. They would think, how can I be the best gas station I can be? How can I be the best doctor I can be? How can I be the best teacher I can be? If you're doing some sort of other higher education or something that you didn't pay into that, all these things, people just generally want to do what they're good at and excel, I would say as a rule, rather than wanting to leech off or trying to be exclusionary or kick out people who they would view as freeloading. But like you said, of course, you're paying for those services yourself. You're paying for that when you go to the doctor. You're paying for that when you pay for gas. You're paying for that when you sign up for an extracurricular course of some kind, some learning thing. So it's a faulty premise, and it's a defeatist perception. You have to wait in line. You won't get access. And it's someone who so focused on what is that, and they attribute everything to the status quo, like you said, where they think that the state education in its current iteration is the only reason we have what we have. That they can't sort of open their eyes and broaden their horizons and think a little bit outside the box.
Yeah, we just had nothing until, we federalized education. Nothing existed. We were just cavemen. Like, it's just just think a little bit further back than 50 years, and maybe you'll get your answer there, dude. You're sort of making that reference to the Department of Education, which I think has only been around for, I think, about 60 now. And the depressing thing is, every time I cite that, it's further and further away, and it gets more and more ingrained into our system. And it's worse. It's worse and worse. It's worse and worse. It's not a coincidence that once we instituted the Department of Education, federalized it all, that spending has gone up threefold, right, on average per student, accounting for inflation. That's because I bring that up. I'm like, how, like, we've increased our spending per student 300%. They're like, well, it's inflation. It's like, no, accounting for inflation, it's 300%.
Yep.
And yet all of our standards are falling and falling and falling. So it's like, okay, like, I get it. Like, correlation does not always equal causation, but there's a pretty strong link between us federalizing education and increase in spending and in decline in standards. And guess what? Anything that you federalize follows the same trend, across basically all departments and all industries. So it's like, okay, well, if you want to make education better, what is it? It's if you want to make housing cheaper, you brought this up, I think. It's like, or if you want to stop investment in something, like you regulate it, right? Because people like are not going to invest in something. If you want tons of investment to happen, then you deregulate it. And politicians implicitly know that, right? So, like, why do we not follow that with our most important thing, which is education?
To the point you're making earlier about all the corollaries between the declining standards, the increased spend, the control, and the phrase correlation does not equal causation. I'm going to go a little bit on a break here. Yes, we all know correlation does not equal causation, but if you applied that rule to every single thing and you can't notice patterns and you can't notice trends and you can't ascertain data from that and make general assumptions, then you would be screwed as a business owner.
Yeah. Yep.
We started offering this product. It sold really well, and more people came into the store. But we can't. Well, correlation does not equal causation. So we need to make. It's like, yes, there are a million factors that can affect that, but as a trend, you need to be able to make these kinds of judgment calls. Otherwise, you're not going to be a successful business for long. And I think that's something that the Department of Education needs to put into their head. Stop getting off their high horse on, well, statistics actually dictates that yes, we get that, but if you were a business, you would have been out of business 60 years ago.
Exactly.
Okay, last post. All blue check marks. I may mispronounce these names, so apologies for that. But it starts with Kathy Reisenwitz, I believe, who tweets, okay, so besides it being economically painful, why can't the rest of the world get together and airlift everyone in Ukraine out to wherever they want to go with full citizenship, give Russia the land, and then stop doing business with them? And then Miriam Zeri, maybe I'm mispronouncing that as well, says, because they are Ukrainian and want to be in Ukraine. And then Kathy replies, so nationalism. This is so good. I was laughing at every step of this as I was reading it. I could not believe it. I even the first line made me laugh. Okay, so besides it being economically painful, like it's just like this little minor thing, like airlifting every single Ukrainian citizen and like relocating. Well, yeah, just because it's going to cost a fortune, like who cares? Like, costs mean something. It's not just like money's this nice little thing and rich people play around with it, but when push comes to shove, you just get rid of your dollar bills and then magic happens. These costs actually mean things. this person's living in fantasy land that probably just spends from their bank account and sees number go up and down and doesn't realize that money is a representation of value created, and you have to invest in that to grow things and to So anyway, I mean, that's not the main point of this post, but I just thought I'd highlight that because it made me laugh. Okay, so besides it being economically painful, I mean, it's like, it's like if you're in a zombie movie or something, and you're you're in the house, and you sort of have a little outpost built, but you're running low on food. And there's a farm across the way, but the house is just covered by zombies. And someone's like, okay, so besides the danger of like getting eaten alive, why can't you just go over to the farm and harvest some potatoes for us? Like, what do you mean besides the economic painful cost? Like, that's a huge deal.
It's the Tiger King. I'm never going to financially recover from this. Like, that's what it would be. There was this fantastic video, I think 5 or 6 years ago, where a professor kind of outlined like the immigration situation in the United States, where it's like, hey, like, and he did it with gumballs, and it was like, hey, like, we've got 369 gumballs. Each gumball represents 1 million people. And he illustrated, he's like, look, like, the U.S. takes almost more than it can take, right? Like, we take 1 million people a year about. I don't know what it's changed as of late, but at that time it was 1 million people a year. And he's like, in the developing world, you're adding another, 30 million people every year in poverty that we think we should take in. It's like, even if we stretched ourselves to the breaking point and took in 3 million people in a year, like, we still wouldn't solve the problem. So what we have to do is go over, or we have to empower people there to like actually develop businesses and develop into really good countries. And every country has their industrial stuff. So what's so funny to me, it's like the population of Ukraine is 44 million people. Like, there's no way you could disperse that many people among countries that would be, one, willing to take them, and then two, could take them. The U.S. could take two? If we said no more immigration from Mexico, no immigration from Canada, no one else can come in, we could alleviate 10% of airlifting 44 million Ukrainians out. And that's despite the fact, right? It's like, this is these people's homes, right? What are you going to go in there and say, hey, too bad, dude, we're giving it to the Russians, you're coming over here, It's just...
Right?
It's so weird, man. It's almost like Joy Behar, it's like this person's like just wants to go vacation in Ukraine. It's like, why can't we just airlift them all out so that I can go on vacation there? It's like, okay, you live in such a bubble.
Yeah. Well, I love this complete mixed reality where so you or I do not, we don't like sanctions. I think I can speak for you there, right? As a rule, sanctions in general, or tariffs, these kinds of things, generally speaking, free trade is good and it reduces prices everywhere, and you don't artificially increase prices. That being said, I would say sanctions, if they can avoid a war, are preferable to an armed military conflict, but there's debate as to how much they work, whatever. So you don't want sanctions, although they're preferable, but you don't want them. So this person is like saying, okay, so let's just give Russia the land. So, Russia creates this unprovoked attack. There's obviously a lot of history, so I guess it's not totally unprovoked, but for what it's worth, it's not a good invasion. You're going in, you're trying to enact violence. We don't like that. And then you're like, okay, well, we'll totally back down and not do anything, let them have the land, but then we're still going to sanction them, and then we're also just going to disperse Ukrainians everywhere, not let them have a say about staying. It's the most, speaking of the last episode, it's like the most Scott Walker policy possible, where it's like, build a border wall on Canada. You're like, you're just saying a bunch of different things that make no sense when you put them together. I thought that was freaking hilarious. And then, of course, the retort, when the person's like, well, they probably want to stay in Ukraine because they're Ukrainian. It's like, oh, so it's nationalism. Like, what?
They just love where they grew up. They love their homeland. How dare them? Everywhere's the same. You can live anywhere.
I don't know for a fact, but let's assume Kathy owns her house, and let's just say that the mafia starts threatening her and says, hey, we want your house. We're gonna take your house. And it's just like, why can't we just relocate her, and just move her out? She doesn't get to sell it or keep anything. It's like, maybe because it's her house and she doesn't want to leave it. Oh, it's housionalism. Like, that's stupid. That's such a dumb idea. Like, oh, she's a greedy capitalist who likes private property. It's like, yeah, it's her home.
This gal should have been part of the George W. Bush cabinet, because her her thought and operation on economically painful airlifting 44 million Ukrainians is almost as ridiculous as saying that we could bring freedom to the Middle East and democracy. It's like this is like your thing about Scott Walker. It's like, this is a stupid idea, and you think because you've never heard it before. She thinks because she's never heard it before that it's really smart because she thinks she's smart. And it's like, no, Kathy, there's a reason you haven't heard this idea before. It's because it's absurd.
Oh, I don't think I have anything else. If you had any other miscellaneous thoughts floating, but. No, okay.
Yeah, sorry, Kathy. I know we dunked on you a little bit, but you can come on the show if you want, and we can discuss it.
Absolutely. Let's have a dialogue. I want to hear your thought process. I want to know how that goes.
Tell me how it works. If you can figure. Here's the thing: if she can figure out how to airlift 44 million Ukrainians out and negotiate a deal where Russia gets to keep the land and the 44 million Ukrainians are happy, it's like, that's a person worth talking to. But
seriously,
something tells me it's not going to happen.
We'll feature this segment on our own show for Cringe Posts, if that's the case, right? We'll play this video, this past 5-10 minutes, and this is the Cringe Post for that. We were wrong. Somehow
we would be wrong.
You can airlift everyone out, and it'll be a fairy tale Disney ending. And with that, we will have our fairy tale Disney ending to this episode. Thanks so much for sticking around and listening. As always, we appreciate it if you guys comment and like and subscribe and share. Tell your friends if you are enjoying the show. We appreciate that growth, and we will see you on the next episode. Take care.
See ya.